Hi guys, this is the second part of the video lecture on the age of Chaucer. In the first part, I discussed three important historic events that happened during the age of Chaucer. And in this part, I'll solely focus on Geoffrey Chaucer and his important work, especially his magnum opus Canterbury Tales, and the important MCQ questions I'll take in the next video. Okay, so let's get started. Now first, Chaucer is called the father of English literature, and he is also first poet to be buried in Poets' Corner of Westminster Abbey. Poets' Corner is where the important writers and poets are buried, like Edmund Spenser, Ben Jonson. And the next is, he lived through the reign of three kings, namely Edward III, Richard II, and Henry IV. His lifetime can be divided into three ages: French period or French influence, Italian period, and English period. And there is a distinct time period you can see here. During the French period, he worked as a public servant to Countess Elizabeth of Ulster, and he went to 100 Years' War in France but got imprisoned and finally ransomed by King Edward III. And during his Italian period, he served as a controller of custom, and he was sent to several diplomatic missions in Italy, in Spain, and he married Philippa Roet, who was a daughter of Sir Giles or Pound the Rod. He is known both by this name, and he was an important and influencing person, and because of this marriage, Chaucer got important position in court. Okay, during the English period, he served as a justice of peace and member of parliament. We will move to his contribution to language. Now Chaucer preferred English to French and Latin, but English was not prominent during his time period. Okay, so everyone tries to speak in French, especially the aristocratic people. But Chaucer, while he started writing, he preferred English to French and Latin. He used East Midland dialect in all of his works. During his time period, the East Midland dialect was the standard dialect. Earlier time period, the London dialect was standard dialect, but during Chaucer time period, East Midland dialect became the standard dialect. He also introduced rhyme roll into English. So rhyme roll is a different kind of rhyme where it consists of 7 lines, and it has a rhyme of AB, AB, and BCCC, and it also consists of iambic pentameter. Now we'll see some important remarks on Chaucer by critics like Thomas Hockley. So he was a contemporary poet during the age of Chaucer. So he said that Chaucer was the founder of fair language, and that is English. John Lydgate, he was also contemporary poets, and we will talk about them in the next video. And John Lydgate praised Chaucer in his work The Fall of Princes. Next, Philip Sidney, and he was a critic of Elizabethan period. So in his work Defense of Poesy, he praised Chaucer's work Troilus and Cressida. Now John Dryden, the critic and poet of Restoration Age, calls Chaucer a rough diamond and must first be polished before he shines. And in his preface to the Fables, Ancient and Modern, he quotes Chaucer. It remains that I say somewhat of Chaucer in particular in the first place, as he is the father of English poetry. So I hold him in the same degree of veneration as the Grecians held Homer and the Romans Virgil. So he gives importance to Chaucer as the Romans or Grecians, they gave importance to Homer or Virgil. Okay, Matthew Arnold, so he was a poet and important critic of Victorian age. So he critiqued Chaucer's work, saying that the Chaucer poetry lacks high and excellent seriousness. So it's very important, you must remember that who critiqued Chaucer, saying that his poem lacks high seriousness, that is Matthew Arnold. And he also at the same time glorifies Chaucer, saying that with him he is born our real poetry, because it is him who started first writing in English, who gave importance to English language first. Now we'll start talking about important works of Chaucer. The first work is Roman de la Rose or Roman of the Rose. So it's a translation of the French work Roman de la Rose, written by Guillaume de Lorris, who couldn't finish this work. So originally the work was Roman de la Rose and written by a French writer Guillaume de Lorris. The text of this poem is found in 3 distinct fragments, namely A, B, and C. It's an allegorical dream vision, and theme was chivalric love. And the poem tells the story of a lover and his quest for the rose, which symbolizes his lady's love, but finally he is unable to get the rose. The storyline revolves around like this. Next, we'll talk about the Book of Duchess. It falls in the dream vision genre. Remember, the dream vision was a common motif during the Middle Ages. Okay, so in the Middle English literature, you'll find in this dream vision genre. Okay, so it was presumably composed as an elegy for the death of Blanche. Elegy is when something written over the death of someone. Okay, Chaucer wrote as an elegy for the death of Blanche, was the Duchess of Lancaster and wife of Duke of Lancaster John of Gaunt. So John of Gaunt was the husband of Duchess of Lancaster. Okay, now remember John of Gaunt was the fourth son of Edward the Third. So Edward the Third was the king during the 100 Years War. Okay, John of Gaunt was also Chaucer's patron. Okay, so he is closely related to Chaucer. The poet begins with his problem of insomnia. Insomnia means you are in between a state of falling asleep and awake. Finally, he is able to sleep while reading a book, and he starts having a dream. He awakes in chamber and the wind of panes are depicting the story of Trojan War. Then he suddenly finds himself outside and joins a hunt in the forest. There he meets a knight who is in a deep sorrow on account of losing a chess game with Fortuna at the cost of his lady love. So the dreamer, he meets in the forest a knight who is mourning over a loss of his lady love because he lost a game of chess with Fortuna. Now, at first, the dreamer doesn't understand the true meaning of the knight's story. He takes the literal meaning of the story and tries to console him, but at the end, he perceives the true sorrow of the knight. Okay, so the metaphorical meaning the knight that he was trying to convey was that's the game of life in which the fate is playing against. But at the outset, the dreamer couldn't understand, but finally he understands that, and when he awakes from his dream and he reflects upon his dream and decides to write upon this dream. Okay, now we'll move to the next poem, Duchess of Fame. You just need to get a hang of the summary. Okay, so you don't have to read it in detail, just get the important details that based upon that the MC question is asked often. That will be enough for you. Okay, now this work takes the form of dream vision and was composed in octosyllabic couplet. It's divided into 3 books and it's an unfinished work, and part of it was taken and inspired by Virgil's Aeneid. Virgil was a classical writer. Okay, so Aeneid was his important work, and it talks about a poet who falls asleep and finds himself in glass temple in his dream, and this glass temple is adorned with the images of famous people and their deeds. And also he meets an eagle who serves as a guide, and they talk about the nature of fame and trustworthiness. The eagle explains that the eagle is a servant of Jove. Now Jove is a mythical god of thunder and sky you'll find in the Roman or Greek mythology. Job seeks to reward Chaucer, so the poet here is Chaucer himself. So the Job seeks to reward Chaucer for his unrewarded devotion to Venus and Cupid by sending him to a house of goddess Fame, who hears all that happens in the world. So Chaucer climbs the hill and sees the house of Fame and finds that the goddess of Fame is having countless tongues, eyes, ears, etc. And these countless tongues, eyes, ears represent the spoken, seen and heard aspects of fame. So it basically revolves around the long dream that the poet had in which he goes to meet goddess Fame in the house of Fame. Okay, now we'll move to next poem, Annelida and Arcite. And it tells a story of a queen of Armenia who has been wooed by a false lover, Arcite from Thebes. The poem begins with 2 invocations to gods. The first was to Roman gods and the second was to the Muses, asking for their help in the story of Queen Annelida. Now in most of the epic you will find that there is an invocation to the god. So in Milton's epic you will find invocation to Muse. So Muse was a god for writing or academic purpose. Okay, here in this work you will find lover's complaint motif, where Annelida complains about how she has been ditched by Arcite. Lover's complaint motif means when a recurring theme that has a symbolic significance. So when symbols becomes a recurring thing, okay, symbols repeats in a narrative, then it becomes a motif. When one symbol is used once, that's not a motif. But when one symbol is repeating again and again in a particular narrative, then that it becomes a motif. Okay, Now we'll move to Parliament of Fowls. So fowls means birds. So it's in the form of dream vision as well, and it's written in rhyme roll stanza. It contains references to the idea of Valentine's Day, that it's a special day for lovers. So the day we know that Valentine's is important for lovers. So it has references to this day. Okay, it's kind of beast fable that we earlier discussed. It talks about the poet's feeling about art and love, and the basic plot is the poet falls asleep while reading a book. In most of his work, in all of this poem, you find that there is a dream vision. The poet starts having a dream. Okay. Similarly, here the poet falls asleep while reading a book by Cicero. The book is The Dream of Scipio, and he starts having a dream about a marriage in which all the birds come with a white eagle together in a marriage. Okay. Now, in this marriage, Saint Valentine sits as a person and talks about what real love and marriage is all about. The poem is humorous in nature and philosophical because it explores the idea of love, and it's also a part of debate and beast fable. Okay, so there is the element of debate, and also it's a beast fable because it involves animal. Now we'll move to the next poem, that is Troilus and Cressida. Now Troilus and Cressida, there is also a play by Shakespeare, so don't get confused. The Troilus and Cressida, it's written by Chaucer. Okay, it retells the tragic story of Troilus and Cressida, which is set against war during the siege of Troy. So Chaucer takes a story originally written by Homer. So Cressida is said to be the first complete heroine of post-classical Europe, and Trojan War is in the background of this entire work. It's taken from the original work of Homer. Now it talks about the fickleness of human love, how women are foolish when it comes to love, how they are inconstant in their love. Okay, so it shows women in poor light. And in the next work, we see that the legend of good women. In this work, Chaucer tries to glorify the virtues of good women. Okay, so he reverses his own idea. It presents a prologue and 9 stories in 10 sections talking about good women such as Cleopatra, Dido, etc. Okay, and the prologue describes how Chaucer is reprimanded by the god of love for writing works that portray women in poor light, such as in his early work that I talked about. So, where Cressida is made to seem inconstant in love. This work is important that Tennyson used, the Victorian poet that we know, Tennyson used this poem as a theme for his poem named Dream of a Fair Woman. Okay. This important 7 poem, you must remember the synopsis of this poem. Now we'll move to his most important works, Canterbury Tales. Now first we'll take a look at the overview. Canterbury Tales, it's a collection of over 24 stories, and it remained incomplete because he died before he could complete it. In the general prologue, he mentioned 29 pilgrims. He had intention to write 4 stories, okay, from the perspective of each pilgrim. So 29 pilgrims and plus 1 narrator. In total, it would be 30 characters in the Canterbury Tales, and they were to tell story 120 stories in total. But Chaucer was able to write only 24 stories before he died. The stories were presented as a part of storytelling contest by a group of pilgrims as they travelled together on a journey from London to Canterbury to visit shrine of Thomas Becket at Canterbury Cathedral. These 29 pilgrims were from different social backgrounds. This Canterbury Tales is an amalgamation of different kinds of people who are living in that time period. Okay, so they all gathered at Tabard Inn, which is in near London. The narrator gives a substantial description of each character except 2 characters, second nun and nun priest. Okay, remember this. In the general prologue, there is a descriptive account of 27 characters, excluding these 2 characters only. So the name of the host was Harry Bailey, and he suggested the group to go together and entertain one another telling a story. So the storytelling idea was of this host. Okay, now the plan was 2 stories to be told while going to the Canterbury and 2 stories while returning from Canterbury. Okay, so there would be total 4 stories told by 1 character, and finally he would judge the best storyteller who received a free meal from him. This was the plan. And the next 3 states during the medieval period. So there was these three medieval estates, namely the clergy or the church, the nobility, the peasantry or commoners. States means major social classes of that time period. Okay, so all the characters, they fall into either of these categories. Okay, the prioress, they fall into the clergy category, the knight, they fall into the nobility, and the peasantry or commoner was the labored and producer of food. Okay, and there is also the another class, the mercantile class, but these three states were prominent. So these states were gender specific. They are defined by what a man does for a living. Women were classified differently into virgin, wife and widow. So they are defined not by their profession but their sexual activity. You'll find this in general prologue. If you read, you'll get a different book not attached to Canterbury Tales. Okay, so in general prologue is an example of state satire. So a genre that satirizes the abuses that occur within the three traditional states. If you read the character's description or the character's story, especially the description, the way Chaucer did, you'll find a satiric tone. So in a sarcastic manner, Chaucer portrayed. Okay, now we'll move to the important tales. So there are lots of tales, and you just remembered some important tales. The first is the Knight's Tale. So the tale is about two friends, Palamon and Arcite, so who are a knight from Thebes, and they go to visit Athens. There they got imprisoned by the Duke of Athens, who is called Theseus. While they were in jail, they fall in love with Emily. So in jail there is only one short window they can look out to the world, and when they fall in love with one girl and her name is Emily, it creates a tension, and when they get out of jail they decide to engage in a battle and fight for Emily's hand. Okay, so whosoever wins, he will get the hand of Emily, and Arcite wins the battle finally, but due to the divine intervention, Arcite dies. And simply the Palamon gets the hand of Emily. So this is the Knight's Tale, and this Knight's Tale is told in heroic couplet. Okay, now we'll move to Reeve's Tale. So it tells a story of a dishonest and arrogant miller who steals flour as he processes grains. Okay, so miller is who works in a mill, and he regularly cheats his customers who bring their grain to his mill. And one day he gets to grind wheat for a college, but the steward of the college was ill. He couldn't come to visit his mill. So because of this, two students from this college, John and Alan, they were sent to keep a watch on him because they knew that he steals. To distract them, the miller, what he does was he unties their horses and he gets managed to have some time to steal some grains. Okay, so when the boys return, they understand his trick, and so they asked to stay at miller's house for a day because it was late in the evening. So one of the students decides to take revenge by sleeping with miller's daughter, and the other two trick his wife into bed with him. Okay, at night when they are heavily drunk, and it happened in the same way they planned. So this is the way they took revenge. So the another name of the story is also Trickster Tale. Okay, so here the trickster is the miller, and the ending of this story is also an ambiguous kind of. Now we'll move to wife's bath. So it's very important to know about the wife of Bath. So Bath is a place. This is a woman who is from Bath. She shares first her tale that how women are perceived, and she talks about marriage and sex and three important things before she proceeds to tell her stories. The first is the position of women in society. She argues that man shouldn't make a fuss over the number of times a woman is married. She gives reference from Bible that King Solomon, who was close to God, had quite a few wives. In Gospel of John, the Samaritan woman at the well, there is this chapter who met Jesus, was married several times. So as the scripture contains this kind of reference, so man shouldn't make a fuss over the number of times a woman gets married. Okay, she talks about the virginity. She argues that in order to remain chaste, women don't necessarily have to be a virgin because every man remains a virgin. So how will the procreation will continue? Now next she talks about 5 husbands. She talks about her husbands, that she's married 5 times, and with her 5th husband she had a physical fight, and because of that she is deaf in one of her ears. Okay, now she tells a story about a knight of King Arthur's court, and the knight has raped a woman. Then he was sentenced to put to death, but the queens and other ladies intercede and gives the knight a chance on condition, that is, he has to find an answer to a question within a span of 1 year, and the question is what women desires most. So the knight likewise sets forth on a journey and tries to find its answer, and but he receives different answers to this question from different people. Finally, he meets an ugly woman while he was returning home, dejected, and the woman guarantees his life with her answer, but on condition that will be asked from him after the judgment at the court. So the next day they travel together to the court, and the knight tells the queen's answer that what women desire most is to be in charge of their husband or lover. So women desires most is to control their life partner. Okay, and the answer was turned out to be right, and everyone was happy and his life was spared. But now the turn came. The old woman asks him to marry, and at this the knight gets repulsed by her ugly face, but he had to do like he had promised her. So on wedding night, the ugly woman gives him two options, two choices. The first was that either she can be faithful but ugly, or beautiful but unfaithful. So at this the knight got confused. The knight asks her to choose on her own, and now at this reply the ugly woman became happy because she wanted to control her husband, because what a woman wants most is to control his life partner. Okay, finally she transformed into beautiful and at the same time a faithful young lady. Now we'll move to Prioress tale. Prioress is the head of a group of nuns. So from the description you find that a bracelet hanging around her waist which has a brooch in it, and in this brooch there is the line "Love conquers all" written on it. Okay, remember this line. Sometimes questions are asked from this. So there is a contradiction shown here, that you see that she has vowed to stay away from materialistic world, and at the same time she is so much into love, the cardinal love. Now she tells a story that talks about a Christian boy and a Jewish quarter. Okay, so there is a Christian school in a Jewish quarter, and this story is a kind of religious tale. Okay, so one day a boy hears a religious song, Alma Redemptoris, and that praises Virgin Mary, and he vows to memorize this song. So every day what he used to do was he used to practice out loud while he was returning from school on foot through the Jews quarter, and at this the Jews got offended and they killed him. But later, miraculously, the boy still continues to sing until his mother finds him. Even if he is dead, he still continues to sing. So it's kind of religious. Now we'll talk about the nun's priest tale. So it's a beast fable with a clear moral about a chanticleer and fox. And chanticleer means a rooster. Okay, in this story we see that chanticleer has got 7 wives, a hen, and his favorite is Partilor. So one night, Chanticleer had a nightmare about a strange beast who killed him while he is in the yard. Next day, he tells his dream to Partilor, but Partilor laughs it off. After some time, one day, while he is in the yard, a fox confronts him and asks him not to be afraid and praises him with flattery. And at this, Chanticleer starts to sing, and the moment he closes his eyes, the fox grabs him by the neck. And while the fox was taking him to the woods on the way, Chanticleer understands that he has fallen into a trap of flattery. Okay, so he does the same. Okay, he starts again flattering the fox and asks him that how did you do this? It was very impressive. So at this, when the fox again opened his mouth to tell that how he did this, Chanticleer flees away and he climbs up a tree. Okay. So the lesson of this story is never trust a flatterer. Okay. In the medieval literature, you will find this kind of beast fable. So that's it in this video. I hope you have understood it. MCQ questions from this chapter I'll take in the next video. So it's important to remember the especially Canterbury Tales, because Chaucer means Canterbury Tales. So minimum one question from this part you will be asked in any exam, especially PubDate or any other college entrance test. So first complete Canterbury Tales, then try to remember his other work. So that will be enough for you. So thank you for watching this video.